Hello, this is J.S. Bailey, and I will be reading Surrender the Chronicles of Servitude Book 3, Chapter 1. 1995. Nate Bagdasarian stood at the foot of his four-poster bed, practicing Camille Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre on his violin for the school ensemble, when the telephone on his bedside table let out a shrill ring. Annoyed, he set the violin and bow down atop the quilt his Armenian great-grandmother had stitched by hand. He'd been practicing that same bar for an hour now, and still couldn't get it quite right. This phone call might be a welcome reprieve. Nate plucked the phone out of its cradle with a flourish, grateful his parents had let him get his own phone line when he turned 16. A small blessing in a household he shared with two younger teen siblings who found themselves incapable of not talking to their friends for 5 minutes. "I've got a surprise for you," crackled the voice of his friend Mick Honeycutt. Mick epitomized everything Nate wasn't: laziness, irresponsibility, and recklessness. Nate had a blast hanging out with him. Nate plopped himself down atop the ancient quilt and ran a hand over the violin. "Is it a plane ticket to get me out of this hayseed little town?" "Close," Mick said. "You busy?" "Sort of." "That violin don't count, man. You know you'll never be the next Mozart or whoever." Nate rolled his eyes. Mick was about as musically literate as a potato. "So what's going on?" "Meet me in your driveway in 20 minutes and you'll see." The line went dead before Nate could inquire further. No doubt Mick had gotten his hands on some new piece of junk car that would last a month before turning into scrap. In the past year, Mick had gone through a junked Nova, a Ford Pinto, and a Datsun held together with bungee cords. Nate wondered what monstrosity Mick would bring to show off this time. Nate picked up the violin and ran the bow across the strings, hitting a sour note. Grimacing, he set them aside again. He could practice some more after he'd seen Mick's new toy. As Nate went to his bedroom door, he felt an odd fluttering sensation inside his head. Shaking it, he kept walking. "You've got to be kidding me!" Mick beamed as he leaned against the side of a gleaming red Mustang Cobra, so un-Mick-like it was almost absurd. "What do you think?" Mick asked, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. It's... wow." For once in his life, Nate struggled to find the right words. "What did you do, rob a bank?" "No, I've been saving up. Got tired of junking a car every few months. This baby here's 2 years old, V8 engine, 235 horsepower, goes from 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds. Want to go for a spin in her?" Nate hesitated before answering. The voice of reason advised him to go back up to his room and get his notes and phrasing right before the ensemble met up for practice tomorrow night. "Just live a little," whispered a different, sweeter voice. "You can practice more when you get back." "Okay," Nate said, "but I can't be gone long." Right, you've got to practice." Mick rolled his eyes. "Gosh, why couldn't you have taken up guitar instead? At least that'd get you some chicks." Biting back a retort, Nate buckled himself into the passenger seat. Mick got behind the wheel and threw the car into reverse. "Did I tell you it goes from 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds? Mick asked, as they cruised along the manicured streets of Autumn Ridge, Oregon. "Oh, does it?" Nate bit down on his tongue to hide a smile. "Hell yeah, it does. You just watch." Nate assumed Mick would take the Mustang out onto the freeway to demonstrate the car's abilities, but instead he bypassed the exit ramp and turned onto a 2-lane state route that headed west into the mountains. Mick checked the rearview mirror once the town had disappeared behind them, and then drew to a complete stop in the middle of the road. Nate's pulse quickened. "What are you doing?" "What's it look like?" Mick jammed his foot down on the accelerator, and the car shot forward so fast Nate felt himself pressed back into the seat. The speedometer needle crept up to 60 in what felt like no time at all. "It took 7 seconds, Mick said with a frown as trees whizzed past them. "Probably because we're going uphill, Einstein. Whoa, take it easy, man." Mick took a curve at breakneck speed, making Nate's stomach lurch like he was on an amusement park ride. He gritted his teeth. "Could you maybe slow down?" Mick eyed him, puzzled. What for? No sooner had he uttered those words when the biggest buck Nate had ever seen strode out of the woods into their lane. Mick swerved to the left, directly into the path of an oncoming car barreling toward them. The sound of screeching brakes filled the air, and before Nate could fully register what was happening to him, his head bashed against the window and pain seared through his neck with an agony he hadn't thought possible. The airbags should have deployed, but they did not. The fluttering in Nate's head came again like the wings of a trapped bird, and the next thing he knew he was floating mid-air above a lonely mountain road as a yellow coupe shoved a red Mustang Cobra into and over a guardrail, sending it tumbling into a wooded valley like a crushed can. The Mustang rolled and bounced about 50 feet before lurching to a stop against a fir tree whose branches shuddered upon impact. The coupe stayed partly on the road, its nose pointing toward the Mustang that lay broken below it. Nate took a closer look at the Mustang as the wind whistled through the trees. No sign of life appeared within. Fear surged through him. He had died in the car. That's why he was floating up in the sky like a ghost. But he couldn't die. Not now. He was only 19 years old. "You can't take me!" he bellowed at the sky, though he knew in his heart that nobody heard him. Something fluttered again inside his mind. "There is another way, but you must surrender yourself to me." He had no clue what that meant, but it seemed the only lifeline he had. I surrender. I surrender." "Very well." Nate's perspective performed another abrupt shift. He found himself inside the car again, suspended by the seatbelt he'd been prudent enough to fasten before Mick began their joyride. The pain in his head burned nearly beyond description, and he struggled to breathe. "Mick," he croaked, looking to his left and seeing his friend's eyes frozen open in surprise. Mick's head sat at an unnatural angle on his shoulders, and his sandy hair and face were awash with blood that dripped off the end of his nose onto the dash. Nate opened his mouth and screamed. Nate's senses grew fuzzy. The next thing of which he was consciously aware was a bright light glowing from somewhere up above. He blinked and saw his family standing around him. Mom, Dad, Leon, and Pamela. His grandmother sat in a chair nearby, blowing her nose into a pink tissue. Nate licked cracked lips. "Where am I?" "The hospital," his father said in a brusque tone. "You've been here all night." Nate tried to smile, but it hurt too much, so he stopped. "That's good, right? That I'm in the hospital, I mean. It means I'm going to be okay." An awkward silence settled over the Bagdasarians, and raven-haired Pamela, age 15, began to cry. "What's the matter?" Nate asked, looking from his father to his mother. Something felt decidedly odd about the way he lay there, though he couldn't put a finger on it. "I am going to be okay, right?" "You most certainly are not!" his mother shrieked. "Your spinal cord was severed in the crash." Before the shock of her words could register fully in Nate's mind, his father took his mother by the hand. "Shirley, get a hold of yourself. At least he's alive." Nate watched helplessly as his mother's face turned cold. "He's never going to walk again. He won't be able to feed himself, change his clothes, go to the bathroom." Nate realized then what felt off. All sensation stopped below his neck, as if he were only a head lying on a pillow. Mom, Her blazing green eyes seemed to belong to a stranger. That stupid Honeycutt boy ruined you, and you were stupid enough to go with him. If he wasn't dead, I'd go and kill him myself. She turned away sobbing, and Nate's father gave him such a look of pity that he started to cry too. But my song, Nate said, remembering the violin he'd left lying on his bed. I'm supposed to be practicing my song. He tried to sit up, to lift his arm, to scratch the itch on his nose, but nothing happened. And then, with sickening certainty, he understood.